everyone. Thank you very much for giving me some time to talk about this today. This is a brand new organization. Although you may recognize the name, we're not the first free speech union, but we are the first one in Canada. All right. So I don't think anybody in this room is whistling past the graveyard. We all know how bad things are, and that's just a few examples. And thank goodness for AI, because we don't need to hire a cartoonist. We just have a guy on our comms team who loves playing around with AI, and it's been producing some lovely comics. You'll see a few. You may know that fellow. That's Toby Young from the United Kingdom. He started Free Speech Union UK about 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago, and set it up as we are, as a not-for-profit, nonpartisan mass membership organization, and it's dedicated to free speech. So there are several sister organizations now. Toby put out a call in a Spectator article last year saying, hey, Canada is really kind of going down a dark path. This was in reference to the online harms bill. Is there anybody in Canada who would like to start a free speech union there? And a few of us kind of, came forward and put our hands up, and the process got underway. And so there's a few of us. That's our board. You'll recognize Bruce over here. You may know Lawrence Krauss, who's an academic theoretical physicist. This guy is a lawyer. Marco Vesely in Vancouver. This Simon Fox is a physician in BC as well, originally from the UK. Hannah Roche is a young lawyer, and there's me. And you might recognize some of our advisory board as well. Eric Kaufman, Stephen Pinker, Wanjira Najoya, Dr. Chris Milburn, John Kay, and Dr. Kulvinder Gill. So why is it a mass membership organization? This is something that's a requirement for all free speech unions that are setting up. Well, as you can see, it can be very daunting to stand up by yourself against all the Goliaths out there. And not only do we want to provide support for people standing up, but we want everybody to feel like they're part of that fight themselves. And so if you join as a member of the organization, you're actually kind of doing your part to be in the fight, to be engaged. So what's our mission? We're going to just basically defend free speech. There are lots of other great organizations in this country, other civil liberties groups, organizations like this one that support academic freedom, but we're just going to focus our mission, and we're going to do it in relation to 4 different distinct categories of service: cases, campaigns, community, and collaboration. So cases. Like some of the other civil liberties organizations, we're going to be taking various cases where the opportunity arises to defend the principles of freedom of expression. And academic freedom would fall under that too, by the way. Right now we're taking on cases in-house with me actually doing it. We have our first case, which I'll tell you about in a sec. But we'll hire lawyers across the country as well, funding permitting, to fight various battles. Now, one thing we can do, we're not a charity, and we're not limited to just defending the Charter of Rights. So free speech, of course, is in relation to the government typically, and so the Charter is usually relevant. But there are lots of places where people's freedom of expression is being curtailed in ways where maybe the Charter doesn't apply, or maybe you want to try a different tactic than just making a Charter application. So, for example, we are suing the University of Western Ontario for over $1 million in damages. And we can't do that if we're just doing a charter case, right? The Justice Center, which is a great organization, I used to work there, CCF, they don't sue for damages. We can do that. And that may be one way that we can really kind of make it smart a little bit for some of these organizations. So let me tell you briefly about Margaret. She is a mature student. She's a little older than I am, from Scotland. She has a delightful brogue. And she was a teacher. She went to Western in the 90s and got a literature degree or something. And she went off to teach in Japan and various other places, teaching English, etc. Came back to Ontario, and she was able to teach adult learners, but she wanted to get back in the classroom teaching kids. But to do that, she had to go to Teachers College. As we were discussing yesterday, there's a stranglehold on education. You have to go through that ideological echo chamber. So on her first week of class, she, in her Indigenous pedagogy class, you know where this is going, don't you? She said, and I'm not going to imitate her delightful brogue, but she said, what do you mean by decolonization? How exactly does that look in a math class, in a chemistry lab, in our classrooms? What do you mean by decolonizing the curriculum, practically speaking? And I guess as John Kay put it in an article he wrote for Colette about this story, I introduced him to her, and he wrote a piece before we started our lawsuit some months ago. He said, you're not allowed to question the oracle. And that's pretty much what it was. She questioned the oracle. And then, of course, she engaged in some commentary and questions in other classes as well. Having a little bit of experience in life, she was able to recognize a lot of the dogma that was being pushed down the students' throats, and she called it out. And so it wasn't too long into the first semester when the Indigenous pedagogy instructor decided she couldn't tolerate this anymore, so she called an emergency meeting of the DEI committee, which met and decided that Margaret had to go. She had to be expelled. And so then they started putting pressure on the associate dean to get this student out. And the associate dean, of course, has lots of credentials surrounding her, her Indigenous, she's been pushing all of this stuff herself, but she, if you look at her bio, this is what she's all about. Although she's very much a settler, she's made it her life's mission to promote Indigenous pedagogy and so on. So she really couldn't do anything but make life miserable for Margaret, and she did. So there were many struggle sessions. Margaret was put under various conditions that she had to fulfill, which were ever changing. After many, and these struggle sessions are all recorded, by the way, and some of them were like 2 hours long. And she didn't get a glass of water, and she was basically questioned on her beliefs and understanding. Like, they were trying to change her worldview in these meetings. And so on one occasion, there was some faculty pinning ceremony on stage, and Margaret walked across the stage and refused to shake hands with her tormentor, which makes perfect sense. But then that became a condition, professionalism. And why didn't you shake hands, and you should apologize? So anyway, it just went on. She ended up having a fight through the whole semester, through the whole year, to try and stay in the program. She ultimately filed an appeal with the Senate. That summer, she got a hearing, and the Senate ruled on her side, actually, and said the conditions had to stop immediately. But by that point, she hadn't been given a practicum. All of her other peers had. So this is a woman who taught for 30 years. They said she wasn't ready for the classroom. And so she's now behind. She's now got to fit 3 practicums in her second year rather than 2, because she only got 1 the first time. So they made life very, very difficult, very stressful for her, really tried to break her. And in the second year, ultimately, she did end up graduating, but it was miserable. So we're suing for damages for what they put her through. And anyway, it'll be one to watch. The National Post covered it a couple weeks ago, too. All right, so cases is one thing. And with governments that are really pushing this boogeyman of disinformation and misinformation, we have to keep on our toes. And so one thing the Free Speech Union is going to be doing as well is campaigns, pushing for and against legislation and that will defend our values of free speech. And we'd like to get into some sector-specific areas too, where we're helping with academics and pushing for legislation, like we just saw, actually, things that will protect merit-based, get rid of some of the dogmatic requirements and ensure that people have academic freedom on campus. So that's one thing. Here's another one of these lovely cartoons. We will not have book clubs like that. But we do want to get people together. And so we had a couple of events already early. We just sort of did a soft launch in February, and we had a couple of events taking advantage of Nigel Biggar, who was in the country. He is actually the chair of the Free Speech Union UK, and so he was gracious enough to give us the opportunity for a couple of events, one in Toronto, one in Vancouver. You can see Professor Ryan Alford was his interlocutor there, and then Lawrence Krauss in Vancouver. They were lovely events. We had a nice dinner for our premium members after after both events. They were really nice. I've never been at a table discussion with 14 people, all of whom listened to the entire conversation. Like, it was lovely. It didn't break up into small groups at all. So we want to keep having events probably once every couple of months at a minimum, conferences and so on. There's lots of plans. I've managed to rope Catherine into being on our events committee, and we're getting lots of things underway. So we have a couple of things coming up. July 30th in Vancouver, Toby Young is coming. September 18 in Calgary, we're going to have an event there as well. And collaboration is the fourth area. And that is in relation to all of the international organizations. We're trying to set up, so there's a Free Speech Union International that's now been created, and these are members. We were in the UK for the anniversary of the FSU there. Those are some of the leaders of the various chapters: New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Switzerland, now Canada, and the United Kingdom, and we're hoping to have many more, especially in countries where there's been backsliding, where they had freedom of expression, but they're losing their way. We're not really going to focus on countries that never had it in the first place. So you're welcome to join as a member. I've got some brochures with the website on it. You can take one with you. There is a discount right now until we decide that we aren't going to have it anymore, for 30% off if you would like to join. We are now open for business. Thanks. I didn't know we were doing questions. Okay, I'll wait. Yes.
Enthusiastic endorsement. What I want to give is an enthusiastic endorsement and an urgent call for every single person in this room to sign up, and at full price. Come on, guys, open your wallets. Several years ago, I followed Toby Young's story about how he did this in the UK. And the reason this is such a terrific idea is it expands it beyond where we've got troubles here and we've got troubles here. The idea of the Free Speech Union is anybody can join, and anybody who has a problem can apply for help. And in the UK, that included students, high school students, university students. People have the problems on a job, like in hospitals and commercial establishments. And instead of parceling people off into categories, and what SAFS does is very, very important, but can't do much for the guy, who's working in a Amazon sort of workplace who's required to salute something. But if this could really take hold, then ordinary people could be less afraid, because for the price of admission, you've got some sense somebody has your back and you can get some help. So this is how this whole hideous thing has happened, is everybody has been afraid, well, if I get in trouble for saying this, I will be punished, and there's nobody to help me. I'm all by myself. So I cannot tell you how good this idea is, and the fact that it's spreading around the world is even better. So this is probably one of the most wonderful announcements I've heard in a month of Sundays, and I'm really glad that you and your committee and your board of directors are on it. And as I said, I urge you to join, and if someday somebody working in retail can call upon this for help, think about the possibilities, because one of the things that Toby Young has found is that when a real lawsuit is threatened, it's amazing how quickly people say, oh, maybe we don't want to continue with this. This is an opportunity for real change. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you, Susan. And you're hired as spokesperson. But
Thanks a lot, Lisa. This is excellent. I was involved with the UK, or I was a member of the UK thing, and I have to blame Toby Young, who said the way you deal with the woke is through humor. That's how you deal with them. And it sort of worked in one way, but it didn't work in others. But anyway, I'm just wondering, the human rights commissions and so on, I'm just wondering what the Free Speech Union's plans are to deal with the human rights commissions, or can you do that, and what can you offer that's going to be different from all the other organizations that are trying to tackle that beast?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question, Francis. And actually, there is one way that I think we can make a difference that others perhaps can't, and that is typically human rights disputes are between individuals, and especially if the online harms bill comes back, and we can probably anticipate that it will in some form, one of the features of it is that people can take other people to the human rights tribunal because they feel that there's been some sort of hate speech or harmful speech, right? And they can get a damages award, and there can be a fine. So now there isn't a government necessarily stepping in and doing that. It's an individual going after another individual. So some of the I think JCCF is trying to now frame this a little bit more as a charter issue more broadly, but that may or may not fly. We can, because we're not limited to the charter, we can defend people who are brought before the human rights tribunals. I mean, obviously I'd like to see the whole thing, the whole enterprise taken down, and maybe that's part of a campaign one day. But certainly on the immediate front line level, if someone is on the receiving end of this because of allegedly harmful speech, they can come to us and we can provide a defense. Again, subject to resources, so that's why we need funding, and we're gonna need to build up our legal team so that we can have people who are available to do all of that. So, it's going to be a process. I like to look at the existing organizations and see where they're at, and I think, okay, that's where we ought to be today. It's not necessarily possible. They got where they are today over a period of time, and we will as well. But first step is to get some funding in, and then we can have counsel outside who can take cases on for us and help with those. So yes, but they're definitely in our sights, and they deserve to be. Go ahead, Eva.
It's a wonderful development, and it's great, and it's long overdue. But my question is this. You're taking care of the legal side. That's a reactive measures, but very necessary. But what can we do to make free speech what it was when I was a child? People spoke, gave their opinions. They weren't afraid to give their opinion. What can we do to that side of the free speech issue?
Well, that is very much a part of our mandate here, and that comes under both community and campaigns. But community first, because people, I think you're absolutely right. People don't even remember. Newer generations have grown up in a very censorious culture. They don't even know what free speech means. So part of our job is to help shift the culture and help to educate people. And that does mean defending speech we don't necessarily like too, right? So the principles have to apply across the board. But education is a big part of it. We do want to have some conferences. We got a couple of grants already that are education focused. So we would like to set up some conferences and some sector-specific things. And another idea that we have, and I was just chatting with Will about, was it Will? About, whether there are campus organizations for undergrads. CCF does Runnymede, which is for law students. It's a campus organization where they get together and talk about the rule of law and constitutional issues. What is happening at the undergraduate level for students who want to engage in debate and have that opportunity? I'd like to see some things happening at various chapters. So we have people looking into getting something like that off the ground too, to go to people who are younger and help them understand why free speech is important and why debate is important. I've spoken at a few law schools recently, and of course you guys are most of you are academics, you talk to them every day. I can't believe how many students will come up to me afterwards and say, what a breath of fresh air that was. And by the way, I don't get to talk in class because I have to worry about what the consequences are going to be. So I hold back everything I'd like to say. It's really a sad situation. And anyway, we'll try and help change that. It's a big task, as you know.
Here's an idea for your next campaign. The province of Ontario in 2024 passed Bill 166, Strengthening Accountability and Student Supports Act. Part 2, every college and university is required to have policies and rules to address and combat racism and hate, including but not limited to any indigenous racism, any black racism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. So we're gonna fight hate. Now there's a minister's directive that goes with this that obligates all Ontario universities to implement essentially an anonymous snitch line where you can file a complaint for hate. Now this would include charter protected speech, surely. Laurier being a leader in this area, was the first to come up with an anonymous snitch system in February. And I just want to tell you that the categories under which you can file a complaint: direct discrimination, systemic discrimination, racial discrimination, workplace harassment. So there's some workplace stuff mixed in here, which is, it's just a catch-all. Workplace sexual harassment, workplace sexual misconduct, poisoned environment, and that's actually in the minister's directive. I don't even know what that means. Hazing is prohibited. Gendered violence, which, so Laurier added a little to the minister's directive. Sexual violence and intimate partner violence are all categories under which you could submit a complaint anonymously at Wilfrid Laurier. And they say no action will be taken unless the conduct violates a university policy or provincial or municipal law. So yes, there can be consequences to these complaints. And I mean, it's like East Germany.
Yeah, it is. And that's our conservative government doing that, which is why I was, frankly, despondent yesterday after listening to Amy Wax, because, you know, we have a conservative government that has been in power for 7 years in this province, and they're still doing stuff like that. They haven't figured it out. And so I don't know if they ever will. But yes, that is, yeah, that's the kind of thing we need to be pushing back against and sending in submissions on, and you know, making a lot of noise about, and giving them some political worry, I suppose, too, that they're doing things like this. So the idea, too, of having people from across the country as members, we can say we represent thousands of Canadians, hundreds of thousands of Canadians. Wouldn't that be nice? And we're very much against what you're doing here. Like, you know, we want to have some power behind what we do. So another good reason to join. Ugh, it's depressing. Anyway, on that cheery note.